travelling with the Bernina Express on the highest railway line over the Alps. Over 196 bridges, the mountain railway fights its way through ice and snow. Daring routing and the wild Grisons landscape guarantee a spectacular crossing of the Alps. The story began in 1898. In 12 years, the single-track narrow-gauge network was built by different companies through the middle of the Swiss high mountains. Today, the railway runs on 170 kilometers of tracks, from Graubünden in the north to Italy in the south. Amidst the natural forces of the Grisons Alps lies Chur, the oldest city in Switzerland. This is the starting point of the famous railway on its way to Italy. Locomotive driver Pat Carvelti has been riding the line for over 10 years. It takes him about 4 hours to cross the Alps. He knows the dangers very well. Above all, the weather and the mountains can always come up with a surprise.
Every working day of ours is special because we have the beautiful nature that changes every day. The mountains. Now in winter, the situation always needs to be reassessed. We drive past the slopes of the mountains. Falling rocks would be a possible danger or sometimes a slide.
Campbell Castle marks the first part of the route and the entrance to the Shin Gorge. The dark valley could only be conquered with a route through the mountain. The unstable rock made tunnel construction difficult. It was not until 1890 that railway engineers opened up southeastern Switzerland. It was originally planned for freight traffic only, a dangerous route. Even the Romans feared the Alte Shin. Then, as now, there was a danger of landslides. The journey from the shady side of the wild gorge to the sunny slopes of the Albula Valley is breathtaking. The Solis Viaduct crosses the Albula, which rushes through the valley 85 meters below. Today, the same quarries still supply the material for repair work on bridges, viaducts and tunnels. But not every stone is hard enough. Quarry operator Hans-Peter Salzgeber knows what to look out for.
Bridges mainly have to withstand the weather, natural influences, and that is rain, snow, ice, water. And there it's extremely important that the water is not stored in the stone and splits off when it freezes. That gives the lifespan. There are stones that you can impose a will on, but with this stone it's rather the other way around. It can be worked into very much, but only according to its will. And it's actually like that in the whole region. You look where the bridges go or where the dangers are, like avalanches, and you check where it's safe. The whole area is like the stone. It's a transformation.
Das ist die ganze Gegend wie der Stein. Es ist ein Wandel. Man erkennt das Gute, dass das ein guter, gesunder Stein ist.
You recognize that it's a good, healthy stone. The color, the compactness shows you. Maybe a few meters next to this quarry zone is a normal Grisons slate. You can't work with it, it decays. But this stone remains compact. And already back then, the people found out.
The Solis Viaduct is one of the first elastically dimensioned stone viaducts. This construction method makes it possible to design parabolic and slender vaults. The framework, an early work by the legendary Richard Koray. As early as 1902, the highest bridge on the Rhétien railway was worth a proud 125,000 Swiss francs to the Swiss. St. George once saved himself from his pursuers with a mighty leap of his horse, one of the many legends that still surrounds the myth-enshrouded route. With a maximum gradient of 3.5% and extremely slowly, the Bernina Express passes this section.
The first train in the morning makes a run here on site to see if there's no stone on the track here, because this mountain is slate-like and not necessarily the most stable. There's always something small crumbling off.
As recently as 2014, a train carrying 140 people was hit by a landslide on this section. The UNESCO World Heritage Route begins in Thusis. The train runs along the Albula, the namesake of the so-called Albula line. It connects the Hinterrhein with the Engadin. About 40 kilometers after Chur, the town of Tiefenkastel marks the railway's entry into the Albula Alps region. On its way through the Albula Valley, the train passes Brienz. Above the village, rock masses start moving faster and faster. But this is not the only threat. The community is doubly endangered. It lies on a slab that is sliding, tearing everything down into the abyss. Giorgin Bonifazi is a farmer in Brienz. His meadows and pastures are being swept into the depths by the slide, a dangerous stumbling block for people and animals. He is afraid he will lose everything, his house, his land, and his animals.
Here, this is a little example of what's going on in the meadows. There are waves in it, and then over time, right now, the ground is frozen, but there's actually a hole in here. Then there are cracks, and at the top we have a layer of humus, usually 15 to 20 centimeters, and at some point it breaks apart, and at the bottom it's just hollow. These are examples that we have many times in the meadows. These are very typical cracks that develop in the road. They start small, and after 2 to 3 weeks, it can be seen on the whole road. And that's a typical effect of our Earth movement. Back there, it has more resistance. Then the ground bulges up, and here the whole thing sinks. And these are cracks. They're extreme, and it has become so extreme in the last 2 years. Of course, there are brutal effects. It will tear the whole building apart over time.
Giorgin Bonifazi has deep concerns. Even though scientists are trying to stop the mountain with new methods, there is no rescue in sight yet.
This is one of the many cracks that can be seen all over the village. And this is due to the movement that we have underground. At the moment, we have up to 1.20 meters of movement per year, and that, of course, leaves its mark. Up there, where the sun shines in, That's where the edge is. As long as it breaks off one by one, about 100 cubic meters per time, it's not a big danger. The worst thing would be if it all came down at once. If we assume the very bad scenario that is predicted, then we're talking about 20 million cubic meters, an unimaginable amount. Then it goes further down to the railroad line. It even buries the Albula. And then there is a backlog as far as Surava. That would be a horror scenario. But it cannot be completely ruled out, unfortunately. The railroad line must be constantly adjusted with our landslide, because it is one slope. That's the big problem. All the people are very challenged by the infrastructure everywhere.
In the worst case, the rock masses would not only bury the village, but plunge deep down into the Albula Valley and destroy the railway line. It would be the most dramatic rockfall in Switzerland. The Albula line of the Bernina Express stretches from Thusis via Tiefenkastel to St. Moritz. The nearly 62-kilometre line is one of the most spectacular narrow-gauge railways in the world. Even when it was built over 100 years ago, the landscape was considered extraordinarily beautiful, and the railway had to fit into it. The diversity of the wildly romantic but also gloomy and lonely Albula Valley can be experienced on the train journey. In the middle of the valley lies the farm of Marcel Heinrich. He has specialized in the cultivation of mountain potatoes. Despite the climatic challenges, his love of nature has kept this mountain farmer going for over 20 years.
After all, I grew up here on this farm, and whenever I leave, it doesn't take long for me to get homesick. This winter was a very strange winter. There was snow, then it melted again, then it rained again. It's certainly not going to be easy in the future, especially in our valleys. That's going to affect us a lot. We have set up a little paradise here on the farm. We started early with agritourism, had crazy ideas. Meanwhile, we market over 46 old potato varieties. We had ideals, which we pursued, also with a certain naivety, but in the end we muddled through. As a farmer, you are most affected by the weather. The weather is becoming more and more extreme. In the summer, it's extremely hot. Then, in the fall, we had an extremely long period of precipitation that has not stopped. It also remains constant. The heat remains relatively long. The rain remains long. And that has a strong impact on us. We really feel that the climate is changing. There are still people who say that this also existed in the past, but I think that slowly but surely, even the last person notices that something is coming, which is of course very scary and means a very uncertain future, especially here in the Alpine region where we are.
Marcel Heinrich is a pioneer who won't let the changing climate stop him. The railway engineers in the 19th century also had to come up with something to conquer the Albula Valley. Their elaborate railway constructions are still stone witnesses of courage and innovation today. The stone bridges of the Albula Railway were the beginning of a renaissance of stone bridge building in Switzerland. With its 65-metre-high, upward tapering piers, the Landwasser Viaduct is one of the most elegant bridge structures in Graubünden. After 106 years, the masonry was repaired for the first time. The three main piers of the viaduct are an architectural masterpiece, as they were built without scaffolding, using 2 cranes. The natural stone viaduct, made of limestone dolomite, is 142 metres long and leads in a sweeping curve over the wild Landwasser Valley directly into a tunnel. The breathtaking sight of this bridge has become the canton's flagship. For some lovers of the line, the Landwasser Viaduct is the real landmark of Graubünden. Retired train driver Gian Caprese knows the history of the railway well. He reminds us of the dangers.
Tunnel construction was particularly dangerous during railway construction, even more so at that time. It's dark, noisy, toxic gases from the explosions. There is no room at all. Some are on their way to the construction site on foot, bringing material. Right next door, invisible, a construction train rumbles along. If you're not careful, you'll end up under the wheels. In between, engineers want to take measurements. That's insanely dangerous. Most of the deaths happened, as they said at the time, through carelessness. So if someone didn't hear the work train after a long day's work and got run over, it was his fault. Others were killed by rocks falling, especially after a blast. Those were the dangers at that time.
The Bergüner Stein blocked the passage to the village of Bergün until 1696. Currently, the tunnel is being renovated. As a protective measure for travellers, brooms are attached to the tunnel entrance so that no one bumps their head when the windows are open. Construction worker Markus Alisch also takes care of the brooms, which ensure safety in the tunnel during construction work.
The brooms are there because the train has open windows and people look out, and the brooms come into profile and they get hit by the broom as a safety measure. Then they have to put their head in, otherwise it would be even more dangerous in the tunnel.
Seemingly insurmountable problems made it difficult for engineers to build the legendary Albulin line at the time. To succeed, they had to find the right way through the extremely narrow valley. Many tunnel workers died during construction. In the Bergün cemetery, there is also a memorial stone for the German engineer Heinrich Perbs. He lost his life trying to rescue workers buried in a tunnel accident. From Bergün, the train makes its way to Preda, in the upper valley of the Albula Alps. To do so, it has to climb 416 metres in altitude, too steep for a direct way up. A solution in the mountain had to be found.
So here we go in, and up there we come out again. And that's where we're in now, and that's where we'll be when we come back out. Now we do the 360 degrees inside the mountain to gain altitude.
To overcome the difference in height, the railroad engineers used helical tunnels several times. This means that the rail line had to be extended additionally and winds its way through the valley in several loops. Passengers were not meant to spend their time in the tunnel, but to see the wild and romantic landscape. That's why engineers were looking for a safe route through open terrain as early as 1900. The high snow makes the road impassable for cars. It is only good for sledging in winter. That's why the railway line is vital for survival, especially in winter. A total of 4 viaducts were built to bring the railway safely through the valley. Because of the curves and loops, it changes sides of the valley several times along the way. The viaducts protect against floods and especially against avalanches. In the Zuondra spiral tunnel, the Bernina Express winds its way upward one last time. When changing direction in the dark, one quickly loses orientation. This solution to the line problems with helical tunnels is as ingenious as it is confusing. Seemingly created for eternity, the Albula Massif appears. Here, the Albula Tunnel digs 100 meters deep through the Grisons Alps. But the mountain world is changing. Ice, water, and the pressure of the towering mountains are taking their toll on the structure. The 100-year-old tunnel must be secured for the future. At the same time, a new tunnel is being built. The old Albula Tunnel takes over an important function as a safety tunnel. The builders of this railway line have achieved almost the impossible, to cut a path through the high mountains, the home not only of people but also of animals.
Exactly, in this section we have very frequent game crossing. You always have to expect deer or roe deer near the tracks. In this season, when there is snow, they are looking for food, and the food is of course always in the valley. In the process, they also cross the tracks. When deer are on the tracks, if you whistle like that, it's like a dog barking. Then they start jumping, and then you mustn't stop. That's how you usually manage not to hit any.
The Swiss Alps attract travellers from all over the world. The bold mountain railway transports some 12 million tourists and commuters through Graubünden every year. Spa guests love to travel the Alps comfortably by train, even in winter. That wasn't always the case. In the beginning, rail operations were dormant during the cold season. Only when the English discovered the pleasures of skiing did winter tourism arrive. Their favourite hobby, horse racing, therefore takes place every year on Lake St. Moritz, as long as it is frozen deep enough. A spectacle not only attended by Swiss celebrities. The mayor, Christian J. Jenny, is happy about the winter hustle and bustle.
The point is this: the English were a bit bored here 100 years ago, and out of boredom, they invented such things as skijoring.
On March the 1st, 1906, skijoring was introduced in St. Moritz, At minute intervals, riders standing wobbly on skis let themselves be pulled by unmounted horses galloping along.
You're at home here in a fairy tale-like setting, and the fact that they built this track here more than 100 years ago is bordering on miraculous. It's not even conceivable anymore in terms of monument protection or nature conservation, let alone the people who built it, who lost their lives. But of course it's ingenious.
It wasn't until the railway was built that the area was developed and opened up to new influences. Today, the whole region depends on tourism and on the trains arriving safely at their destination. From St. Moritz, the train travels over the Bernina Pass up to Alpe Grüm. Not only is it considered the highest train over the Alps, but it's also one of the steepest railways in the world, with a gradient of up to 7%. The next stop is Morteratsch, in the Upper Engadine. Swiss researchers here are running a 2.5 million franc project to save the glaciers. The Morteratsch glacier is to grow again. It used to reach as far as the railway line, but in the last 20 years it has retreated by about 20 kilometers due to climate change. The ambitious project aims to develop a method of preserving Graubünden's largest glacier as a freshwater reservoir for future generations. Glaciologist Felix Keller wants to go beyond that, even make the glacier grow. A weather station helps him to check the effects of climate on the ice.
Wind speed has gone up extremely. Shortwave radiation, longwave radiation, temperature in the snow.
He wants to know what climatic conditions are causing the glacier to melt today.
The idea is really quite simple. In summer, on a hot day, the Morteratsch glacier loses up to 1 million tons of ice a day. And that's when a lot of ice melts. This means that a lot of meltwater flows off. And if we keep it up in summer, we can freeze it again in winter, when it's as cold as it is now. We're talking about meltwater recycling, actually a very simple approach.
The glacier has to be covered with snow all year round to prevent further retreat, because without ice, the weather at Morteratsch can trigger hazards.
The glacier retreat is releasing very large amounts of debris here at the moment. On the one hand, these are transported away by the river during floods and can trigger flood hazards. But there can also be rockfall events. It's an area that's fully in motion right now.
Stories entwine around the legendary Morteratsch. The young alpine dairyman Arach has no chance of marrying the daughter of a rich farmer and goes off to live abroad. When he returns as a successful man, the girl has died of a broken heart, and he also takes his own life. To this day, the ghostly call of the beloved can be heard. Morteratsch, Morteratsch. From Morteratsch, the train winds its way over the Bernina Pass. The journey takes about 30 minutes, through ice and snow, to the lonely station of Alpe Grüm. Alp Grum, the last station before heading into Val Poschiavo and Italy. Only by train can this lonely place be reached in winter. When the last train leaves the station, it becomes silent. Only the wind can be heard and the crackling of the glaciers. The moon allows a spectacular view of the mighty mountain massif, even at night. Early in the morning, the first train from Val Poschiavo struggles up the mountain to Alp Grum. It brings not only people, but also goods to the lonely railway station. The innkeeper, Primo Samedini, depends on the reliable deliveries of the railway. It transports everything he needs for his guests. Today it brings a particularly precious commodity, water. The inn's own spring has been buried by snow and frozen.
Have you got the 100 francs? Well, then we're ready to go.
Twice a week, the railway brings a 25,000-litre water tank. A short break for the railway employees.
I think there's going to be a huge storm today. Well, if it doesn't wind, then it just storms.
Primo Samedini hopes the weather won't get worse. There's a strong wind blowing. It makes the work difficult and dangerous for the men. The locomotive can go in two directions and steers the water tank backwards up the hill. The clock is running. The water tank has to be emptied in the exact amount of time between two trains meeting at Alp Grum.
Do you think Squid can do it alone?
Primo Samedini is grateful for the help of the railway. The railway workers have installed a cistern here, which they connect to the tank to pump out the water. Snow and ice have buried the water source, crushed the mechanical connection.
I am very dependent on the Rhaetian Railway. If they didn't bring the water, I'd have to close my business. We get the water from the mountain, from the Sassalmassone. That's where the Rhaetian Railway has its own spring. It's not that it's frozen, it's that the whole spring has shifted because of the strong, fast fall in the autumn. And at the moment, it's impossible to go up and push the spring back. Instead of the water being captured, it just goes down next to it, and we have no way to get at the water. We have very little water coming in, just enough for the daytime operation.
It's not until late spring, when the snow has melted, that the connection can be repaired. In the coming months, the innkeeper will still depend on the railway to deliver water. The men love working in the mountains, even if it is dangerous. They work where others go on vacation. On the way back, the mountain panorama shows Piz Palu and its hanging glaciers. The empty water tank on the way to Val Poschiavo. The hotelier also registers the climatic changes of the last years.
The first years it was very cold. even minus 20, minus 23 degrees. The last years, especially this winter, you get minus 10 to 11, but not any colder. It's funny. But now the train is coming.
With the regional train also comes the garbage wagon. Twice a week the hotel can dispose of its waste this way.
The weather today is not bad at all. It's worse when it snows, when there's a danger of avalanches. Then it's more difficult. But we organize ourselves so that we have fresh produce for at least a week.
Alp Grüm is the highlight of the trip. The warmth of the historic station buffet makes you forget for a moment that you have to brave ice and snow again outside the door. From the very beginning, effective snow removal was a prerequisite for winter operations on the entire Bernina pass line. Railway employees had to know how the snow behaved. Only then could they control and safely trigger avalanches. Even in the 1930s, there were various methods of getting the snow off the mountain. Cannons and mortar shells were used. And sometimes avalanches were set in motion on purpose by skiers. What no one believes anymore is that witches and ghosts set off avalanches to bring misfortune on local residents. Snow removal on the Rhaetian railway network is still a serious and dangerous matter, especially in the shelters, like here, in a so-called open gallery. The snow accumulates everywhere, even on the walls. The work is stressful and takes place under time pressure. Snow and snow ploughs have to be gone before the next train rolls in. Precise timing is essential for safety on the track. Despite the many years and hundreds of missions, the men are always happy to arrive safely at their Alp Grüm location. Primo Samedini still has to get to Ospizio Bernina today. It's one stop away from Alp Grüm, on the route we took at night. The train is heading north through a pass depression. There it is exposed to the strong winds. Even in dry weather without fresh snow, the train tracks are covered again in no time. At 2,253 meters above sea level, Ospizio Bernina is the highest railway station on the Rhaetian Railway. The lonely and windy station is always a new challenge, not only for the passengers, but also for Primo Samedini. Icy, cold and, above all, snowy winters demand a high level of commitment from employees and vehicles. Time and again they have to prove their skills and avert the dangers from the railway. In heavy snowfall, the only thing that helps is the snow blower. The machine runs at a maximum speed of 20 kilometers per hour and can adjust its speed to the snow depth and obstacles. With 2 chimneys, it sprays the snow to the side. Caution is called for. Roads, houses or cross-country ski trails mustn't be covered with snow. Railway foreman Andy Crameri is also working on the snowblower. For him, the day has already started in the night at 2 o'clock.
Our problem is not only the new amount of snow. Of course, we have to take care of that. What is a problem, especially on the Bernina here, is the wind. It can be quite a nice day, like today. Today's a very nice day. But still, we have to plan an operation. If there's drifting snow, that's also a problem on the mountain.
The strong wind can quickly gather large amounts of snow, difficult to see and insidious, because there's the danger of an avalanche. This is how snow clearance on the highest railway transversal across the Alps looked back in 1930. A small wonder of the world. Up to 10 employees of the Rhaetian Railway struggled through the metre-high snow walls on the Bernina. Everything was arduous. Manual labour was required. Thick masses of snow pushed the rails apart. They had to be re-measured on site and immediately straightened again. On the cleared track, the Bernina Express is safely on its way. Shortly after Ospizio Bernina, on the way towards Chur, the train passes Lago Bianco, a reservoir on the Bernina Pass on the border between the Bernina and Livigno Alps. At an altitude of 2,234 meters above sea level, it is clearly visible, especially in summer. It takes its name from the milky waters of the nearby Cambrena glacier. From Alp Grum into the Val Poschiavo to Tirano, it is still a little more than 30 kilometers. For this, the Bernina Express needs about 1 hour, because it goes downhill, and that means braking. The students, Francesca and Raffaella from Milan, are travelling in Graubünden for the first time. Francesca enjoys all the sights on this route. It's really unique how the train spirals up, especially when it goes through the mountains, Raffaella says. For Francesca, it is an ibex that really goes everywhere. The ibex is just the right symbol, she says, a real mountain climber.
No, io sono pugliese in realtà, ma vivo a Milano,
The friends Laura and Valentina from Milan think of a completely different animal. Given the speed of the train, they think of a turtle. because the train is so slow.
Una tartaruga.
For Adriano from Bergamo, the train is much more than a mundane means of transportation. He sees it rather philosophically.
To compare the train to a snake is perhaps a bit too obvious. For me, it's more like an eagle because it gets to the top, showing us what we otherwise can't see, because we don't have wings to fly.
After Alp Grüm, the train makes a 180-degree turn. Heading north, the high alpine glacier world shows itself one last time. On the other side, towards the south, the breathtaking panorama of Val Poschiavo opens up. The train winds down into the valley with an average gradient of 7%. With a sometimes deafening squeal, it masters the steepest section of the Rhaetian railway. Invisible at first glance, the threat of global warming. Striking changes are occurring, especially in the high mountains. In Switzerland too, natural hazards are increasing due to snow and rock avalanches, rockfalls and thawing permafrost. Vital for the survival of the railway is the protective forest. Forestry engineer Diego Battilani is responsible for the preservation and care of the trees in Val Poschiavo.
The forest protects us from avalanches, rockfalls, landslides, erosion, and is therefore essential for our survival in such a valley. Without forest, we can no longer protect the Rhaetian railway. And then nothing works at all. Here we are logging for the Rhaetian railway, and we have to remove the heavy trees that are too close to the line, so that they don't fall on the railroad line during a storm or with heavy snow.
The maintenance of the protective forest is a dangerous task. Especially on the mountain, trees protect people from natural hazards. Storms increasingly cause great damage and destroy entire forest areas.
Over there you can see this white area. It's about 40 hectares. And on that area, about 12,000 cubic meters of wood have been lost. At the moment, the protection function there is no longer guaranteed. It will take years until the new forest can grow and then take over the function again.
The reforestation takes years. It's still uncertain whether the violent storms will increase in the long term and what impact they will have on the railway line and on the people in the valley, even though they have always been used to living with natural forces. The first UNESCO World Heritage Site structure on our trip is the circular viaduct in Brusio. It is considered the ingenious finale on the Bernina line. Thanks to its circular architecture, the bridge overcomes a change in altitude and performs a turn of 360 degrees. Its outer surfaces are made of granite, a stone they were able to quarry along the route This circular viaduct is considered the most original structure of the Rhaetian Railway. From Brusio, it is not far to Italy. The journey takes 4 hours. The train crosses the Albula Valley and climbs high into the Bernina mountains. As the highest railway line across the Alps, it connects Switzerland with Italy. On the final kilometers, the train becomes a tram. The UNESCO World Heritage Route is proof of entrepreneurial daring and the pioneer's sense of beauty. Only in this way is it possible to rediscover one of its most beautiful landscapes in the heart of the Alps. In northern Argentina, the world-famous Tren a las Nubes, the cloud train, crosses dizzying viaducts and deep valleys. At fearsome heights of over 4,000 meters, the once highest railroad in the world travels past cactus forests into the now driest desert in the world. A technical masterpiece in the Andes. More than 600 years ago, the Incas came from the north over the mountains to the Valle de Lerma in search of fertile land. A few centuries later, the Spanish conquistadors penetrated deep into the fertile valleys of northwestern Argentina in the province of Salta. Until today, the inhabitants live off tropical agriculture. Tobacco, beans, sugarcane, wine and pink grapefruit are harvested. Just a 2-hour flight north of Buenos Aires lies the provincial capital Salta la Linda, nicknamed the Beautiful. Neoclassical churches and squares lined with cafes tell of its eventful colonial history. For decades, the Tren a las Nubes was the only connection to the world for the Salteños. These days, the commuter train runs here because those who can afford it live outside the provincial capital with its 500,000 inhabitants. The cloud train not only transports people, but also precious ores and agricultural products to faraway Chile. The story of the legendary railroad line begins in 1921. The steel strip on the route through Argentina measures 450 kilometers. Only on a short section of the line does the cloud train, the Tren a las Nubes, still run today. Shortly after Salta, they encounter the first technical challenge, a massive riverbed. At 260 meters, the longest viaduct on the route spans the Rio del Toro at a height of 23 meters. The River of the Bull is a trickle most of the year. Only in spring does it become a raging torrent. The construction of the line cost the lives of many workers. They came from all over America and Europe to lay what were then the highest rails in the world. Even today, the graves below the viaduct are silent witnesses of the railroad construction. Much of the rail line follows the old ranchers' cattle trails, which were used to drive the animals through the mountains to the other side for sale. The route was dangerous. Every year, many animals died on the way. With the discovery of saltpeter in the valleys, the construction of the railroad line began. The Ramal C-14 connected the city of Salta with the Pacific Ocean on the other side of the Andes. In 1948, after 27 arduous years, the ambitious project was completed. More than 600 men lost their lives, most of them in the numerous blasts. Some also strayed from the path in the dreaded viento blanco, the white icy wind. No one knows the exact number of victims. Nevertheless, the good pay and the adventure attracted many railroad workers in droves. Equipped with 400 shovels, 300 pickaxes and mule carts, they dug the stony path for the huge bridges and viaducts of steel and stone. The Transandino del Norte needed 44 bridges and viaducts to reach the mountain desert of the Andes. Maintaining the rails in this inhospitable region is costly and not lucrative for passenger traffic. Freight trains also rarely run on this line anymore. The gauchos Diego Armando Lamas and Joaquin Quipildor belong to the Pacha Inti commune, the Coya people.
Cantar una copla para que lo cante cualquiera.
The songs of the gauchos are about approaching death, the dangers of hostile nature, and the fight against colonial powers. The two gauchos lead a modest but also proud and free life on the railroad. With their traditional dress, they recall the story of the brave Martin Miguel de Güemes, who fought and died in the Gaucho War for Argentina's independence from Spain in the 19th century.
Here it is. You fixed this on the side. I put on this sombrero. This poncho is very important because it symbolizes the flag of Salta. The same one was worn by Martin Miguel de Güemes. It is his legacy to the gauchos of Salta. Off we go.
The red ponchos were the uniform of the gaucho army infernales. The colour red stands for the blood that was spilled. Since the Tren a las Nubes no longer stops here, the gauchos live their wild lives independently in the solitude of the Pampas.
Life has changed a lot since the train no longer goes this way. There is nothing going on here. Now the train only comes down here once a month for maintenance on the wagons, and then it's gone again. But it's really changed a lot, in that we don't work as much for the tourists anymore, because the train used to come by here regularly and stop up there at the station. Now I'm here in the countryside and I take care of the agriculture, the sowing. I take care of my animals. This is the little I have, and I'm happy with it. Yes, very happy, because this is what I have here on this earth. This is a gift from God. I'm really happy. And if I have it my way, I will always be here until I close my eyes.
For the two men, one thing is certain. No matter how hard life is, they will stay here. Brown, reddish rock formations thrown majestically along the railway line. In the Puna, the desert, grow the giant candelabra cacti called guardians by the indigenous people. According to legend, in each cactus lives a deceased who will eventually leave his prickly grave to avenge the bloodbath that the Spanish conquistadors have caused here. Primitivo Yapura, from the Tastil tribe, lives from his knowledge of the plants of the Puna.
In the past, our grandmothers and mothers used these pointed needles for sewing and knitting, and they still do. They used to pull them out of the cactus. The wind here is very strong today. This is a different kind of cactus. We call it tunilla, and it's smaller. It grows along the ground and only survives if it rains. If it doesn't, it dries up. Our ancestors taught me how to use the herbs and how to collect them, and then I copied it. I want to preserve the knowledge about it. I hope that these wild herbs will be preserved.
Ojalá que no se pierda, son hierbas naturales.
The rails run through an area known for its minerals.
Bueno, esto es un trabajo que hicieron hace ya.
These rails were laid 100 years ago to transport the minerals from this area and also for the people who lived here.
Y también en un tiempo para transportar los pasajeros que había acá en la zona.
Unfortunately, this has been abandoned. But sometimes tourists come by because there is the tren a las nubes, the train to the clouds. It goes up through the mountains.
Y para nosotros es el turismo que llega por esta razón de que existe un tren.
This area is very dry because it doesn't rain much here. It rains only in January, February, not in the other months. And there are very few native plants that grow here.
Y son plantas naturales de este lugar que son muy pocas las plantas que hay. Me voy a juntar jarilla para vender al.
I'm going to collect la rea to sell to people who use it to heal their aching bones. That's what my grandma taught me as a child, that you have to collect la rea as a natural remedy for bone pain. They bathed in it, heated up water, and washed their bodies with it.
Se bañaban con eso, calentaban agua y se bañaban el cuerpo con eso.
You can find these plants here because they grow only at an altitude of 3,000 meters to 5,000 meters above sea level. They don't grow at the bottom. They have many nutrients. This is due to the minerals in this area.
Primitivo stays here as one of the few people who have learned to survive in this inhospitable region. Just like the workers who came to Chorrillos more than 20 years ago, even in the early 1980s, people were still being hired to entertain the passengers of the Tren a las Nubes. Like Concepcion Sosa, who, with her family, accepted the offer to purchase land here at a low price and build a life for herself along the railroad line. Concepcion belongs to the Diaguita people. Like all other indigenous peoples, they were forced by the Spanish conquistadors in the 16th century to abandon their faith and convert to Catholicism. But most of them kept their faith in the gods of nature. Today, Concepcion prepares an offering for Pachamama. That's what her people call the mother of earth and time.
These are the herbs for Pachamama, to drive away the evil spirits. Since I do not have a ready-made incense mixture, I collect herbs in my garden and make the incense from them. This is to fumigate everything, the plants, the paddocks, all the fields and hills, and the water sources, to drive out the bad energies. I ask Pachamama that I do not lack grass for the animals, nor drinking water.
Concepcion benefited from the times when the Tren a las Nubes stopped regularly in Chorrillos. But serious accidents happened again and again. Therefore, the railroad company has suspended operations. A fundamental repair of the tracks was too expensive, they said. To find a new job here is impossible.
The train to the clouds has been gone for about 7 or 8 years. It no longer runs over our tracks here in the area of Chorrillos. Before, when the train came, it was a different life. It brought work for the people who live here, in this place called Chorrillos, where I have also lived for 20 years. I came here because I like this place. This place attracts me.
For Concepcion, this place, with its stony, dust-dry soils, is where she is closest to her gods.
Soy una madre creyente hacia la Pachamama.
I am a mother who believes in Pachamama, our Mother Earth. To her we owe our harvest. Everything we sacrifice to her, she gives back to us.
El fruto para poder nosotros solventar nuestros gastos, poder vivir.
The yield with which we pay our expenses, to be able to live, to have joy in work and strength. We ask her for healing. We ask her for blessings, from above and from below.
Ella nuestra madre querida, que nos cuida, nos ilumina día a día.
She is our beloved mother who takes care of us, enlightens us day after day. Night, evening, morning, from sunrise to sunset. Beloved Mother, thank you for everything we have here on earth.
According to belief, Pachamama is not only the goddess of fertility. Her figure resembles that of a dragon, and when she is angry, she triggers earthquakes. With her offerings, Concepcion wants to make the goddess merciful.
Pachamama, Holy Earth, Pachamama of the hills, Pachamama of the mountains, Pachamama of the paths, Pachamama of the waters, Pachamama of all the fields, do not forget your beloved daughter, who I am here on earth offering you the sacred leaf that gives us life. Beloved Pachita, do not forget your children on this earth. And now we have lost the tren a las nubes, the train to the clouds. I have nothing to pay my expenses. I do my crafts. I do not know where I will go because I have no other place. The train doesn't come around anymore. When do you think it will come again? Pachita Mama, Holy Earth, if only you could bring it back. Pachamama of the mountains, Pachamama of everything.
For years now, Concepcion has been praying for the tren a las nubes to run again and bring back tourists.
Pachamama, Holy Earth, I ask you to heal me, not to abandon me, to protect me from all dangers, from all evil, from everything. I am sick, my body. Pachita Mama, heal me. Pachita Mama of the mountains. Pachita Mama, make me healthy and beautiful.
Alcohol and cigarettes are offerings to Pachamama. Apparently, Mother Earth has rather human needs. Concepcion prays for the return of the good old days. Whether the tren a las nubes will ever stop here again is written in the stars. From Chorrillos, the route climbs steeply up the mountains from an altitude of 2,100 meters to almost 3,800 meters above sea level. Almost 130 kilometers northwest of Chorrillos lies the old mining village of San Antonio de los Cobres, the beginning of the part of the line where the world-famous tren a las nubes still runs. Cobres means copper, which was mined and shipped in large quantities here. Today the mines are closed. Instead, locals offer handicrafts to tourists: wool ponchos, home-knitted socks and herbal teas. Before the construction of the railroad line, the people were self-sufficient and lived mainly from llama breeding and the sale of their products. But with the discovery of large copper deposits, a railroad line was urgently needed, as only freight trains could transport the valuable ores. This section was to become the highest railroad line in the world at the time, and many workers struggled with altitude sickness. Nevertheless, they persevered. At almost 4,000 meters above sea level, hundreds of men laid the rails, almost without tools, with their bare hands. The line was planned and built by US engineer Ricardo Fontaine Muri. The train line brought San Antonio modest prosperity for many years. An architectural masterpiece totaling 780 kilometers that connects Argentina with the Chilean coast. Today, San Antonio de las Cobres lives off of the tourists. There are not many of them, however. Most of them come from the provincial capital of Salta and have a 3-hour bus ride ahead of them. In San Antonio, they are allowed to board the tren a las nubes 3 days a week. Around 50,000 tourists come every year, despite the steep price of 70 euros. But today they have to wait a long time. The old diesel locomotive is on strike. The passengers should come back in 3 hours. Until then, the locomotive will be repaired, so they say. The train drivers are working flat out to find the fault. The tourists are getting impatient. Just a few years ago, a train derailed. This is another reason why it is strictly forbidden to talk to the two drivers during the ride, although the men are so proud that tourists come from all over the world to ride their train. The diesel locomotive was built in Argentina over 40 years ago. Breakdowns are part of everyday life for Luis Alanis and Andres Dominguez.
There are faults everywhere, and every machine is sometimes defective. Every car is sometimes damaged. Our locomotives are very old, from 1978, 1979, and until today we keep them running. A lot of people work on them, and thanks to them, they still work. These are machines that we can still use today. The train is a landmark for our area, where we work, which is an honor for us. It is what represents us above all. Apart from the climate, the cold, there are many things that affect us. We like operating these insane machines. For us, it's impressive. No more. We just have railroad blood in our veins.
After 3 hours, the passengers can finally board. It takes about 30 minutes to drive from San Antonio Los Cobres to La Polvorilla Viaduct. Train manager Martin Yaguado is on board every trip. He makes sure there's enough water on board. This is essential for survival in the dry Puna desert in case the train breaks down. Dragon of the Cordilleras is the name given to the cloud train by old people who still remember the days when it used to be powered by a puffing steam engine. Since 1977, diesel locomotives have been pulling tourists from San Antonio up into the mountains, and sometimes actually up to the clouds, hovering beneath the viaducts and resting on the peaks. In winter, the way is clear into the perfect turquoise blue of the sky. The first viaduct crosses the river of the same name, San Antonio de los Cobres. From here onwards, the line is one of the 3 highest railroad lines in the world. It leads through untouched nature and over spectacular mountain ranges, but it is not for the faint-hearted. Few travelers know the dangers of this area. Landslides, earthquakes, mudslides. Natural disasters are not uncommon in this section of the Andes. Train manager Martin Yaguado knows many deadly stories about the plateau.
Hay que imaginarse, de hecho, que
one must imagine that great obstacles had to be overcome to build a structure of this magnitude.
muchas vidas.
The construction of this line has cost many lives.
Y hay referencias muy simpáticas a propósito de esta entrevista. Me atrevo a decir que hay una referencia.
There is even a railroad station called Dead German, which refers to a German who long ago, before the train had reached these latitudes, perished while crossing the mountains in the middle of winter because of the low temperatures.
En medio de las inclemencias del tiempo, del clima.
And today, it is a railroad station that commemorates this unfortunate event.
East of San Antonio Los Cobres, in the direction of the Copper Mountains, there's a seismological station. Irene Perez and Juan Pablo Aguiar are responsible for safety here. The seismologists continuously keep a watchful eye on their readings. All tectonic movements that could be dangerous to the Tren a las Nubes are recorded. The last quake had a magnitude of 4.4. From magnitude 5 and up, the railway line can be damaged.
Irene, this is the sensor. It sends us the signal that it receives from the monitoring of this station. San Antonio de los Cobres. And here you can see last night's earthquake.
Exactly. The one in Jujuy last night, for example. Sure, that was a magnitude 4 earthquake and was also recorded by this seismological station.
This sensor is very sensitive. It is a STS 2.5. These sensors are used in other institutions to record nuclear explosions, or small explosions, or distant events. Careful. Very good. The railroad tracks can sometimes be damaged when the ground deforms and changes morphology due to a seismic wave. For example, in the 1977 San Juan earthquake, the railroad track was damaged and bent due to the seismic wave causing permanent deformation of the ground. This seismic wave, the permanent deformation, and there you see
the map.
There you see San Antonio de los Cobres.
Correct. This is the epicenter. This was an earthquake of magnitude 4 on the Richter scale.
Size 3.
No, that's another one.
But it's closer to our station.
Of course.
Can this also happen in San Antonio de los Cobres with the Tren a las Nubes?
It is unlikely that this will happen. Let's put it this way. This is an area with high seismic activity. There have been many earthquakes here, and yes, they often affect the ground. And if the ground is affected, then that also affects the rail track.
From here, you can see the station of the Tren a las Nubes, right?
Sure, that's right.
Under the watchful eye of the seismologists, the train rolls on through the Puna highland. The high plateaus of the desert rise up to 4,200 meters. The extreme altitude is exhausting for most travelers. At over 4,000 meters, oxygen becomes scarce. Even at 3,000 meters, many passengers already experience headaches and become breathless. One young woman is particularly troubled by the altitude. She complains of nausea, dizziness, and headaches. For these cases, the Tren a las Nubes has a specially equipped infirmary. 2 nurses and a doctor look after the passengers with oxygen tanks.
The lady who is unwell is Solona Sangue Dolce and comes from De Salto.
We'll give you some oxygen. What do you feel? Are you short of air? And is it difficult to breathe? Good. Now we're going to check your vital signs. We'll see how your oxygen supply is. 89, that's a little low. Open that up for me a little. That will help you get rid of the lack of oxygen. This is called hypoxia. It's not really a breathing problem. The oxygen will help you raise the oxygen saturation in the blood. That affects the head, the heart, the lungs. That's why you get dizzy. You get nauseous. You want to throw up. The oxygen is a cure. There's nothing better. Well, now we'll see how much oxygen you now have in your blood, whether the saturation has improved. It's better. You now have 92% instead of 89, and that's good.
Tirelessly, the Tren a las Nubes winds its way higher and higher, struggling its way through dozens of curves through the mountains. At over 4,000 meters lies the abandoned Concordia mine. Founded around 1900, lead, zinc, silver and copper were mined here. In 1986, the mine was closed as the mineral resources were exhausted. Mining came to a standstill. Now, tourism is meant to create new jobs. At the old loading station of the mine, the locomotive has to move from the beginning of the train to the end, because from here on, the Tren a las Nubes is pushed. For the locomotive drivers, the altitude is the biggest challenge.
The winter here in the mountains is harsh. We have to endure temperatures of up to 20 degrees below zero. We get clothes that can withstand the extreme weather. Sometimes it's hard because you have to get off the train in between. Then you're away from the cozy heating. Getting off, getting under the train, checking brakes, making sure the whole gearbox is in optimal condition. It's not nice to work like that in the winter, but we like it. Just like my colleague said, it's our passion.
With an average speed of 25 kilometers per hour, the Tren a las Nubes approaches the highlight of the trip, the La Polvoría Viaduct, a masterpiece of engineering. Excitement is spreading among the passengers. No wonder. The ride over the graceful viaduct is the most spectacular moment of the trip. Almost 70 meters to the right and left of the viaduct, the ride descends into dizzying depths, not for the weak-kneed. The longest pier measures 67 meters. The iron girders were shipped from Italy. The steel structure is 224 meters long and weighs an incredible 1,600 tons. It took 2 years to complete. Floating over the gorge on this viaduct is not a sight you forget easily. After the viaduct, the section authorized for passenger traffic ends. From San Antonio de los Cobres to La Polvoría, the Tren a las Nubes has covered just under 22 kilometers of track. From here on, only freight trains are allowed to continue, although the condition of the rail line seems precarious. The icy heights are the preferred habitat of the wild vicuñas, a species of camel. The village of Olacapato is one of the highest places in Argentina. Inhospitable, without drinking water, in a barren volcanic landscape at almost 4,100 meters. On its way to the Argentine-Chilean border, the Tren a las Nubes crosses the sandy canyons of the Devil's Desert. It's hard to imagine the tracks finding support on the subsoil. The hostile area is part of the Atacama Desert, where only people who are familiar with the conditions of nature survive. Like Edu Samaja Gia, he grew up here and learned about the plants from his indigenous ancestors.
This plant is called tola, and here in the Puña we are at an altitude of 3,500 meters. It is a very hostile place, where there is little oxygen, hardly any water. It's very difficult for organisms to thrive here. This plant survives with little water. The locals use it for firewood, because there are no trees in the area. And it's the only thing you can use it for. And around here is Tola Grande. That's where the name of this plant comes from. There's hardly anything growing here, and that makes it difficult for life to develop here. There's also very few animals here.
The smoke of the tola bush is also considered by the locals to promote labor, ancient knowledge that helps people survive in this wasteland.
In this region, you have to be able to live under very harsh conditions. For that, you have to be born here. People who come from somewhere else can't cope with these conditions at all.
In this inhospitable area lie the turquoise ojos de mar, the eyes of the sea. Their water is 4 times saltier than seawater. The bizarre saltwater holes got their name from the indigenous people. Scientists have found microorganisms in it that could play a role in biotechnology. The rails brought workers and goods to this abandoned stretch of land for good reason. Without fresh water, no natural flora and fauna could grow. Today, barely more than 100 people live here, cut off from the world and dependent on the handful of residents who can afford a car to drive 6 hours across the desert to the nearest supermarket. Only a few descendants of former railroad workers defy the harsh living conditions. They belong to the Coya people who live in northern Chile and northwestern Argentina. Mario Aloncay was born in Tola Grande, the son of a miner and railroad worker.
Esta casita son casas
These cottages are railroad houses. They were built here in the 1960s. Before that, there were other houses made of other building materials. This one is built with railroad ties. That's what holds the tracks of the rails together. That's why the houses here look like this. They're connected with mortar. They have no supporting columns, no iron, nothing. They're just ties. And, as you can see, they're stacked staggered, and they were only delivered for the railroad personnel. This village was created by the railroad. It was practically created by the railroad and mining. It was actually artisanal mining in the past, not like mining nowadays. That's the history. And now we live here, in a village that had its heyday and then died, and now is about to be resurrected.
At the old train station of the city, the minerals used to be loaded and transported by train to Chile. This has long since ended.
My grandfather, my parents all came from the province of Catamarca to find work here. And then they worked in the onyx quarries of Arica. There are about 10 quarries where they extract onyx in different colors. My father stayed here and later had the good fortune to join the railroad.
New mines give the inhabitants hope for the future again, so that the next generation can live here as well.
This is onyx stone. This is what was transported by rail. There are still traces of it here, remains of the broken stones that were brought by trucks from the Arita quarry at that time. There were several quarries there. The stones were brought here to Tola by truck and then loaded onto the railroad cars and taken to the various destinations where they were used for arts and crafts or construction. And then all the mining, especially the sulfur mine, which came after the onyx and the rock salt, the iron, the sulfate and all that. Well, all this was transported by rail, not like today with trucks, but everything was transported by rail. We even still have part of the wooden cattle wagons, because the animals were also transported from here, from Salta, Argentina to Chile. So that was the whole meaning of the railroad. At that time, in the heyday of the railroad, there were 4 freight trains a day.
Mario believes in the future of Tola Grande. He hopes that the Tren a las Nubes will once again run to the border with Chile. Silence still lies over the tracks in Tola Grande, and a bitterly cold night descends on the hamlet on the edge of the desert. From the spectacular La Polvoria viaduct, the rail line runs nearly 400 kilometers through the Sala de Poquitos to the sleepy town of Tola Grande. From there, the Ramal C14 tracks lead to the Sala de Arizaro, the second largest salt desert in Argentina and one of the largest in the world. The soil here consists of salt crystals and sediments. Strictly speaking, the Sala de Arizaro is a huge salt lake. In the Kunza or Atacamena language, the name means sleeping place of the vulture. The mountains in the distance are so-called yardangs, which form in wind-dominated landscapes when soft rock is weathered and abraded by strong winds. Those who travel here with the four-wheel drive are in most cases being taken to work in the mines by professional drivers. At an altitude of almost 4,000 meters lies the new Lindero mine. Since 2018, gold has been mined with the help of enormous earth-moving activities. In 2021, almost 3 tons of the precious metal were extracted. Based on scientific research, the entrepreneurs expect gold deposits for the next 13 years. Over 300 people work and sleep here. Their shifts change on a weekly basis. The crumbling houses of the former workers in the quarries still bear witness to the wealth of the mineral resources, and of ancient times when precious minerals, such as onyx, were a magnet for adventurers. It's not only the continuing demand for precious raw materials that attracts people to this area, but also the fascinating landscape. Within sight of the mine is the enigmatic Cono de Arita, an almost perfect volcanic pyramid of salt and black lava, a sacred place for the locals. A perfect natural cone with a height of about 200 meters and a diameter of 800 meters, the Cono de Arita is one of the most amazing natural formations in Argentina. The Tren a las Nubes has covered almost 400 kilometers on the Ramal C14 route and overcome more than 2,000 meters of altitude. The traveled section of the railroad is a testament to the dream of conquering the world by rail. What once seemed lucrative and audacious is now a monument to the brave men who put their lives on the line for this endeavor. Today their goals are a little different, but still big. A night train from which travelers can admire the shining stars in the clear night sky from a sleeping car on one of the world's most dangerous railroad lines. In the 1970s, a rail line was built in Africa at enormous expense by China. The train rolls over 320 bridges from Tanzania to Zambia. It is called Tazara, a technical masterpiece in a wild and pristine landscape. The Tazara connects the port city of Dar es Salaam with Kapiri Mposhi in Zambia. The 1,860-kilometer route makes the landlocked country independent of the apartheid-ruled countries of East Africa. Dar es Salaam is the economic and cultural center of Tanzania. With the largest port in East Africa, the city of millions on the Indian Ocean is developing into a modern metropolis. The city vibrates with dynamic entrepreneurial spirit and the desire for commerce. Mobility is the order of the day. Road traffic plays a major role, but the villages far from the big city are still served by rail. The largest train station is in Dar es Salaam. 500,000 passengers are handled here annually. Most of the passengers travel third class. A ticket for the entire route costs 28, one for the first class sleeping car 40 euros, as much as an average monthly salary. The security measures are strict. Every piece of luggage is checked and plastic bags are prohibited. The reason? Environmental protection. Despite the threat of punishment, not everyone complies with the new law. In the 21st century, the station has the most diverse functions, from the waiting room to the backdrop of an improvised fashion shoot.
Let's go.
The journey from Dar es Salaam to Kapiri Mposhi takes around 50 hours. The express train covers the distance in 42 hours. The locomotive is manned by a team of 2, which is changed 8 times on the track for safety reasons.
Watch out.
Engine driver William Lu Yalu knows the dangers.
It's a danger profession, but what should we do? We should be extra vigilant and careful, especially when carrying passengers. You're carrying human lives. To be very attentive and careful.
The small farmers hoped that the Tazara would bring them the freedom they had long been looking for. They finally wanted to be independent from white oppression. The Tazara is therefore more than just a railway. Also for Catholic priest Aloysius, the train is still a symbol of Afro-Asian solidarity.
It was a way of helping other countries in Africa that were not yet liberated from colonialism, and most of them were in the southern part of Tanzania, like Rhodesia, which is now Zimbabwe, and the other one is South Africa. So Uhuru is the liberation.
The road out of addiction was arduous. The Chinese African team spent 6 years building the train line. 100,000 Chinese and African workers cleared the way for the rails with machetes. Even old pastures of the Maasai were sacrificed for the Freedom Railway, ending their worldly secluded life in nature. In the midst of one of the oldest forests in the world, the Kazin-Zumbwi forest, tree after tree fell for the lonely Mzenga train station. Several times a day, the Tazara was supposed to stop here, cater to travellers, and some would even spend the night here. But the dreams have been shattered and the rails are empty. Necessity makes these villagers inventive. Without further ado, the rail line is converted into a road and the rail vehicle into an ambulance. It's the only way for this sick woman to get to a doctor quickly. For the love of their Liberty Railway, the railway workers are here to stay. The loyal men still make regular trips to check the tracks. Discarded wheel sets or railway ties lie admonishingly at the edge of the rails. When the Tazara train arrives, the train station comes to life. the inhabitants of the Kazin-Zumbwi forest hurry to do a good business during the short stop. They offer the travellers homemade snacks such as roasted peanuts or fried dumplings and drinks. A welcome opportunity to supplement the slim budget a little. Making people full and happy was the idea behind the largest infrastructure project of the 1970s in Africa. Tanzania and Zambia are still among the poorest countries in the world. There is a lack of funds to make travel safe and comfortable. English teacher Home Hachuba and her family would rather take the comfortable bus, but it's even more expensive.
Because the program is very poor. The program is bad for the train. Yeah, it's just because I didn't have enough money, because I am not alone. I am traveling to the funeral with my parents and my brothers, so I have to sponsor them. Yeah, that's why I'm using this train.
After all, the Tazara reaches a speed of 110 kilometers per hour on the plane, the equivalent of a German regional train. Often the third-class compartments are overcrowded and passengers have to make do standing between the compartments. Will the exclusive view on the landscape compensate? Shortly after Mzenga, the Tazara reaches the Selous Game Reserve. At around 52,000 square kilometers, the reserve is the largest game reserve in Africa and the second largest on Earth. Unlike Tanzania's other national parks, commercial big game hunting is allowed in the rugged Selous Game Reserve. Only the non-hunting areas in the north are accessible to safari tourists.
I like to ride this train because then I can see our animals. In general, it's good to take the train. It reduces the stress in the head. And so I arrive at home very relaxed.
Finding the right path for the railway tracks in the middle of the savannah was a great challenge. The encounter with wild animals brings dangers with it. Going on a safari tour with the Tazara remains an adventure.
When I'm operating the train, actually I have to see at a certain distance to see that the line is clear. If I find that the animals crossing, I have to slow down to allow the animals to cross safely. And if it happens that I meet them by accidental, we've got also horns and we've got also some bells. Yeah, you switch on the bells, ding, 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 ding. So we caution them. And some of the animals which are usually on the line, they are very much aware of the train.
These monkeys make a quick getaway. But large animals like elephants have derailed more than one train. For train drivers, that means always stay alert. About 200 kilometers after Dar es Salaam, the train reaches the railway station Kizaki. Already at the beginning of the 19th century, an important meeting point for the caravans of Arab traders and slave hunters. The socialist planned economy predicted a great future for Kizaki. Not much of that has remained. The trains run infrequently. Their arrival time is unpredictable. The timetable is therefore recorded on a board with washable chalk as a precaution. The employees opened the packing and weighing station. Although no one knows if and when a train will arrive today, the daily business becomes a test of patience. On some days, the announcement changes every hour. Today, the Tazara is already 8 hours late. That doesn't stop anyone from ticketing. There's no better way to get away from here anyway. The families of the railway workers are often also traders and small farmers. In the 1970s, they bought land and believed in a good business with corn, potatoes or rice. The Tazara gave people hope of a regular income, of building a future for themselves and their children. But it is precisely the small stations that are being closed by the railway company and the employees laid off. The expected upswing along the railway line has failed to materialise. The train is expensive and not profitable. The modern age has not yet arrived at the stations due to the lack of money. Actually, here the train should be handled by the telephone block system. But this important machine has not been working for a long time. Signals, telecommunication systems, or simply cables, everything has been stolen or dismantled. In Kizaki, station master Christopher Mpanda and his colleague Simon Mfungo are responsible for a safe train handling.
I have almost forgotten how this machine works. The Chinese brought it with them. With it, we controlled the entrance and exit of the trains. Here we pressed. We call it calling. The next station answers and tells you that in the next 24 hours, at 8 o'clock, the first train will arrive. That is, we set up for the next train to arrive at 8 o'clock. And we block the track for it.
Since the machine is broken, train dispatching now runs via cell phone. Often there's no network, but still it works, somehow. The fear of wild animals is greater than that of a train accident.
I've only been here for a month, and I'm not used to the wild animals yet. Whenever I go out and handle a train, I hear them, pretty close. It happens really often. This month, already more than 5 times. The loudest are elephants or hyenas. I make a lot of noise and make them go away. But when I hear the trumpeting of an elephant, I quickly go back to get my colleagues. It's less dangerous if we do the work together.
Each train is sent out manually. Also the so-called shoma, an auxiliary vehicle used for track inspections and transportation of workers. The Tazara is still not in sight, so even the film team is allowed to continue the ride with the shoma. To the northwest of Kizaki, Mikumi National Park borders the Selous Game Reserve. Together they form an ecosystem of almost 60,000 square kilometers. In contrast to other national parks in Tanzania, the Mikumi is still relatively unknown and can be discovered individually. The African crocodile is not as harmless as it looks. It grows up to 6 meters long and hunts reptiles, fish, birds, and even humans. Mikumi National Park is surrounded by towering mountains and forested foothills. To the east, the Uluguru towers high, while to the south, the Lumango can be seen. From Kizaki to Ifakara, the train runs through an inaccessible area, and according to the timetable, always only at night. Seeing the beauty of this route by day is the exception. Along the foothills of the Mikumi and Udzungwa Mountain National Parks, the Tazara River traverses a fertile floodplain over a stretch of nearly 200 kilometers. Here too, people settled in the 70s to build up their own business and to work for the railway. They took care of the security of the stations and railway lines. After almost 40 years, the population still has to learn to live with the railway. Since no one knows when the next train will really arrive, its danger is fundamentally underestimated. Even after 40 years, an accident on the tracks. A rail vehicle collided with a moped. Fortunately, the driver remains uninjured. The train crossings are unpaved and accidents happen again and again because someone parks his moped on the tracks. Now it's taken by Shoma to the nearest train station and handed over to the police. Everyone is happy to have escaped with a scare once again. The route between Mlimba, the kingdom of elephants, and Makambako, the place of bulls, measures 158 kilometers and poses the greatest challenge of the entire route to the builders of the railway. A short journey into the past, 100,000 men fight against the dense forest. The whole area is difficult to survey. On loamy paths, they haul all the equipment up the mountains and back down again. 330,000 tons of steel rails alone have to be laid. Along the route, sleepers and bridge sections are produced in tent camps, 24 hours a day. The work involves the construction of 46 bridges and 18 tunnels on this short stretch alone. The heavy rainfall in this area is a major challenge. Complicated drainage systems are to prevent landslides and derailments. Surveyors use chainsaws and machetes to clear a path through the dense forest. The entire area is sparsely populated. The men are completely on their own. The tunnels are propelled with explosives. The teams are under extreme tension. The whole world is watching the construction of this rail line. More than 3,000 workers are responsible for the tunnels alone. 17 of them are killed during the construction period. The last section of the most dangerous route runs along the foothills of the Mufindi Highlands. The area is one of the coldest regions in Tanzania. In some places, snow even falls in June. The changeable climate and the rainy season put the bridges to a severe test. Rust gnaws away at the iron railings. No one can control what happens deep in the concrete over the long term. At some points on this dangerous route, the Tazara reduces its speed to 20 kilometers per hour for safety reasons. The technical details of the showcase project are kept secret to this day, for fear of attacks and acts of sabotage. there is no budget for comprehensive security measures. Using simple means, the track builders find out if the rails are okay or need to be repaired. Fred Ngeve places stones on the rails. This way, he can check whether they have sunk or lifted and need to be repaired.
I love my work. It allows me to send my children to school and pay their school fees. Also, I can meet my family's needs and buy clothes. Through my work here, I can afford it. I put stones on the rail. Because I want to see where it has sunk. This one is too deep. I have to lift it.
There is a great danger that the wheel will jump off the rail and the train will derail. The Tazara employees have a hard time keeping the train in good shape. The engines and wagons built in China often break down and cannot be repaired. The old locomotives barely manage to drag the long train up the steep mountains. They literally run out of air. But even with the 6 new diesel locomotives from China, passenger and freight traffic is not without problems. The fact that the Tazara is still running at all is a small miracle for some travellers. For a long time, an additional problem was superstition. The teacher Nicholas Niundo remembers that the country people believed that the train would anger the forest spirits. Therefore, the Tazara gave them the creeps.
People believed that Tazara was eating people, so they did not know anything about it because it was very new to them. They did not see it before, so they believed that Tazara were eating people. But they did not know that this is the mode of transport which they can use to move from one place to another. Whenever I see it, sometimes I was even learning from where I was, going to my parents, or even get inside their home just to hide myself when it is passing.
The landscapes the Tazara traverses are anything but neutral. They're full of spiritual meaning. The Chinese cannot know them. As the builders reshape this landscape, they disturb sacred sites and the position of power of the village chiefs. Ghost stories are told of trees that are cut down for the railway but stand upright again in their old place the next day, of bridges that have just been built that collapse and tunnels that close again as if by magic. Only when the Chinese listen to the advice of the local guides do all the problems disappear as if by magic. Today, no one has to be afraid on the Tazara. In the past, acts of sabotage, thefts and accidents made rail travel dangerous for people. But safety on the Tazara has improved significantly. Each train carries a mobile police station, so that crimes can be recorded and prosecuted immediately. A large part of the route the train crosses at night, a time that you can comfortably travel in the sleeper car. 6 sleeper compartments in first and second class are part of the standard equipment of the Tazara. Tourists in particular enjoy the luxury of the 4-bed cabins and let themselves be lulled to sleep by the steady rattling of the rails. After 850 kilometers by train, the railway reaches Mbeya in the southern highlands of Tanzania. Here the Tazara crosses the Great African Rift Valley, a fissure in the earth that stretches for 6,000 kilometers from Syria to Mozambique. Lake Nyasa. This is the name of the lake in Tanzania. It belongs to the Great Lakes in the East African Rift Valley. The third largest lake in Africa borders Tanzania, Malawi and Mozambique. Over 1,000 different species of fish cavort in this stagnant body of water, more than in all of North America and Europe combined. With a length of 560 kilometers, a width of up to 80 kilometers and a maximum depth of 704 meters, it is a giant of inland waters. Lake Nyasa was formed several million years ago, making it one of the oldest lakes in the world. People live from and with the lake. Even superstition has to do with fish. In the past, women were forbidden to fish. To make them feel good, they had to be given fish. Otherwise, so the belief, it was possible that they would hide fish as witches and conjure up floods. If no fish were caught for a long time, witch doctors, so-called chikangas, were called in to solve the mystery of the missing fish. Heading north from Matema, the impressive Livingstone Mountains are on the right. Named after the Scottish African explorer David Livingstone, who travelled to Lake Nyasa as early as the mid-19th century. According to his will, "My heart is in Africa." His servants buried his heart at this place after his death. During Sunday services, people forget their worries for a brief moment. In their songs, they praise God, who can make anything possible, if only they praise Him firmly enough and believe in Him. Well knowing that religion is the food for the soul, but only hard work ensures their survival. Farmers use the fertile mountains along the East African Rift Valley for large-scale tea and rice cultivation. In the valleys, smallholders have been planting bananas and cocoa, among other crops, on their plots for over 100 years. Since artificial agricultural products are not available, they have been producing genuine organic cocoa since time immemorial, completely without fertilizers or other chemicals. Their incomes are low, just enough for the bare necessities. Family planning is in the hands of the women, as is the care and the upbringing of the children. Contraception is frowned upon in this patriarchal society. 5 to 6 children are common because having children is considered life insurance and retirement provision. Near Lake Nyasa lives cocoa farmer Erika Sibila. In a project financed by a Belgian chocolate manufacturer, she can buy land and learn how to manage a plantation. In a sustainable way, she wants to improve life for everyone in the village. Her most important goal, however, is a good education for her children.
I have become a farmer. I grow rice and corn, bananas and cocoa plants like a real farmer. But I'm also pulling up a small business. I sell mandazi, fried pasta, and also salt. Big traders at the market then sell it on. I myself do not go to the big markets or by train. I look forward to the years when my children can read. I hope that I will succeed in building a good home for them. My brother has already passed away, and I also help his children and pay for their tuition. I pray to God to give me a long life.
From the sleepy region at Lake Nyasa, the railway line is easily accessible via an expressway. For many small farmers, this is an opportunity to promote trade with their products. The Tazara crosses the border into Zambia from Mbeya. At route kilometre 1068, the train reaches the small market town of Chozi. From here, it is only about 200 kilometres to the provincial capital of Kasama. In Chozi, the train is already eagerly awaited. The small farmers want to load their last harvest here. It can be small 20-kilogram bags, but also 50 kilograms or even more. The main thing is to make it onto the train with your luggage. After all, no one knows when the next one will arrive. Assertiveness is required. Pushing is obligatory. Anyone with fears of contacts must stay outside. Most women are travelling on business. They know how to fight their way through. However, very few travel alone. They feel safer in pairs. The trader Felice Chongo is going to Tunduma today with her friends.
There used to be a lot of thieves on the train. They not only stole from us women, but also insulted us. It was really dangerous. We didn't feel like travelling on the Tazara anymore, and we're already thinking about how else to get away from here. But now it is possible, because the police is also on the train. Lately, we had our peace. For me and my baby, it's okay to travel by train. Especially at night, it is safer than by car,
says young mother Rosemary Combo. The construction of the railway line has completely changed this region. The people of Zambia have moved behind the Tazara and settled along the tracks. The trader Teresa Bwalia even has feelings for the Tazara.
For me, the train is a cat. She is friendly.
Especially in the hard-to-reach regions, people are completely dependent on the Tazara. 54% of the population lives from agriculture. The farmers need the railway to transport larger harvests. If the railway leaves them in the lurch, their last chance to earn money would disappear. Time seems to have stood still. People still live almost as they did 100 years ago. Reforms are urgently needed. After 2 days of travel, the train reaches Kazama. In former times, the place had a strategically important meaning in the East Africa policy of Europe. At that time, the Germans and the English fought the First World War, also on African soil. In 1918, the German Schutztruppe under Paul von Lettow-Vorbeck, coming from German East Africa, advanced to Kazama. They learned of the armistice in Europe on November the 13th. After the end of the last battles, the British and Germans marched to Abercorn, today Umbala, in northeastern Zambia, on Lake Tanganyika. There, Lettow-Vorbeck laid down his arms on the 25th of November 1918 and thus ended the First World War in German East Africa. It was only after World War II that the country freed itself from colonialism. The old power structures have been shattered, but today it is the high debts in China that Zambia feels squeezed by. Even though the population is grateful for the railway financed by China, there is resistance to its economic presence in East Africa. The next major stop is Serenge. This small town near the Muchinga Mountains is the eye of the needle between the developed south and the underdeveloped north. The town is the starting point for tourists to various Zambian national parks. Not far from Serenge lies one of Zambia's official natural monuments in the middle of the wilderness on the edge of the Muchinga escarpment. Kundalila Waterfall, a place sacred to the people here. The name Kundalila means weeping dove in the local language Bemba. The Kaombe River plunges 80 meters down the steep face. At the foot of the waterfall is a natural deep pool surrounded by wild flowers. Visitors are allowed to swim here and are even encouraged by the park authorities to camp and picnic on the grounds. Park manager Samuel Kampfwa has been working here for over 20 years. He knows the history of the waterfall very well.
Long time ago, we used to have some doves just here. They were just rotating and crying just within here at the falls. Then, after it was declared as a national monument in 1964, that's when we allowed now visitors to start coming in and visit the falls. So to them, they thought of when it goes under the water, it swallows something like a precious stone called gold, and they tempered to kill one. And you know those doves, they like to stay where it is very, very much peaceful. And that's how we lost the doves here at Kundalila Falls.
From the top of the falls, you have a great view over the untouched Luangwa Valley. Gigantic forces from the Earth's interior have divided the landscape here millions of years ago. 100 kilometers south of Serenge, the train reaches Unkushi, the penultimate stop on the nearly 1900-kilometer route. The town lies on the Tanzam Highway, the Tanzanian-Zambian expressway, built by the USA in the 1970s. Relics from another time, the old freight cars at Mkushi station. Not much is left of the once lofty dreams. The economic upswing does not want to materialize. Trucks that happen to be passing by can be relied on more than the railway. Hitchhikers set off in search of a job. Many people have lost confidence in the Tazara. The train line could not keep its promises in the long run. The state-financed railway company is losing out to free enterprise on the roads. With the Tazara, the state does not earn enough money to bring the track facilities up to the long overdue state of the art. Every moving train, whether freight or passenger, awakens the fighting spirit of the railway employees. They're not giving up on the Freedom Train, not yet. A job at the railway is still like winning the lottery, even if employees have to wait months for their paychecks, as they did this summer. Almost 50 years ago, the Tanzania-Zambia Railway was Africa's largest infrastructure project. It was primarily intended to help the poor people in the outback. The Tazara was a symbolic expression of state power. It was intended to realize the post-colonial dream of prosperity for all. Today, the railway is more an example of a non-functioning economic system. No one really takes train traffic seriously here anymore. The railway is becoming a stomping ground for everyone, including the animals. The district of Mkushi is rich in minerals and precious stones, but at the station, nothing of this can be seen. Nevertheless, it is the train from which the young generation expects a future. For railway worker Chanda Bwalia and his girlfriend Cecilia Mwape, the future lies on the rails.
Okay, my personal dream about Tazara is I want to see a change within the company.
And even up to now, it's like facing the same problems, especially like financials. So my greatest dream about it is to see it change, because I really love this company. I want it to be operating like just these other rail companies, like in Germany, China, and other, like South Africa is also doing great in this type of transport. So my greatest dream about Tazara is to see it change and operate normally, like the way it used to happen in the time that when it was opened. That personal relationship between me and the train. Yeah. And it has always been my dream since childhood. When I see the trains moving, I'll be like, I also want to be one of those guys who drives those, one of those guys who repair rails. So it's like a dream come true to me, because it's something that I was wishing for, and it came to a reality. Now that I'm in, I want to like do the things that I was wishing that time. I want to do them now. Yeah.
The vision of mobility for all is still there. Train driver Samuel Mukwa does not lose faith in the Tazara.
Personally, from the way I look at it, I would relate it to an elephant. Looking at the elephant, by nature of it, it is huge, just like the train itself. Then it has power. It has power, electric locomotive, and looking at the pace at which the train moves, it is very different from other automobiles. Usually here in Africa, trains are considered to be a bit slow, just like an elephant itself. So that's the reason why I would relate it to an elephant.
A strong elephant that also knows how to get out of a crisis. Zambia still has large copper, cobalt and gemstone deposits. The country used to be the fourth largest copper producer in the world. However, falling prices and nationalization of the mines almost led to the ruin of this industry. Thanks to investments and increased demand for raw materials from China, Zambia is now earning more again. But there is nothing more to do for Tazara's freight traffic. Competition on the rails has become fierce. Since the end of apartheid, the rail companies of East and South Africa have been fighting against each other and for every load. After a 52-hour journey, 105 stops and 1,860 kilometers, the Tazara reaches the terminus at Kapiri Umposhi in Zambia's so-called Copper Belt. Around 500,000 people a year travel on the Tazara twice a week. Despite the dangerous route, the train is considered safe, and fortunately nothing happened this time either. It is still uncertain what will happen with the Tazara, but one thing is certain: this train is loved. Even if the locals would prefer to get to their destination faster, those who have travelled from far away like the so-called slow tourism, the new trend of travel. Slow but intense is definitely guaranteed on the Tazara. And because you do not always know when you will leave or arrive, there is also enough adventure included. The Ferrocarril del Sur runs through the middle of Peru's mountains. To this day, the rail line is a wonder in the world of trains. The journey takes you through magnificent landscapes and an unexplored and inaccessible area. In the middle of the Andes lies the city of Cusco, the navel of the world in the legendary Inca Empire. Despite the magnificent colonial buildings, the power of the former rulers is still evident. Emperor Pachacuti's presence can still be felt. In the main train station of Cusco, the Hiram Bingham train waits for guests from all over the world. The train has already travelled a long way. Its starting point is Singapore. Peruvians are proud of their folklore. A traditional dance opens the first leg of the journey on one of the most dangerous railroad lines in the world. From Cusco, the Andean explorer heads south across Lake Titicaca to Arequipa. The Hiram Bingham makes a detour northwards to the legendary Machu Picchu. The train is a famed attraction. In the past, it was part of the collection of luxury goods of an Asian king. In Peru, the wagons were completely restored. Now the travellers can enjoy the landscape in a more relaxed way. The width of the train tracks also had to be changed to accommodate the narrower South American rails. The train leaves the safe plains and enters the dramatic mountainscape of the Urubamba Valley. The tall, deforested mountains and extreme weather take a toll on the railroad line. During the rainy season, devastating floods and landslides regularly wreak havoc throughout the region. The Valle Sagrado is also in danger. The sacred valley of the Incas was, and still is, an agriculturally important valley. As in other countries, a railroad line was built in Peru to transport the produce, a very dangerous railroad line. In April 2004, a landslide paralyzed the rail line and claimed 11 lives. Only 1 year later, the tracks were buried once again. Not far away are the Maras salt flats, the highest salt farm in the world. Salt production in the mountains? A confusing idea. But the Andes also once lay on the seabed and only appeared after a tectonic shift. A tiny little spring irrigates the salt pans, and warm salt water springs from it. It supplies the individual salt pans via a wide labyrinth of channels. This alone ensured that already the Incas were able to mine white gold here. In the dry season from May to September, the water evaporates due to the high solar radiation. What remains is a white crust of salt, the harvest of the farmers. Up to 150 kilos of salt can be extracted from each of these basins. Heavy rain in the dry season would destroy the salt harvest. To this day, the descendants of the Incas therefore pray to their Pachamama, their Mother Earth, for favorable weather. Industrial chemist Maria Esperanza Zambrano Hurtado has a good view of the dangers.
The opposite hill was already worked on by the Incas, but then there was a landslide. That's why we've been working on this side for many years now.
Every 3 days, the water in the pools evaporates. Then they need to be refilled. The soil here is well suited for salt production. Nevertheless, each salt pan must be maintained once a year. Salt mining itself is a back-breaking job, poorly paid and physically demanding. The work is done by hand. Machines aren't used in the salt fields. Today, salt labourers still work like their ancestors did in the pre-Inca era. They began mining the white gold over 2,000 years ago. The view upwards can make you dizzy. The mountains to the right and left tower over the train line. On the way to Machu Picchu, the Hiram Bingham passes through one of the most impressive ecosystems in the world. This forest in the clouds seems impenetrable, so dense that the ruined city remained hidden behind the tropical vegetation for centuries. Long purple pedicles characterize the Queen's earrings, in Europe simply called a fuchsia. The Machu Picchu amaryllis also grows here, and an endemic orchid, the Cyrtochilum minax. The cloud forest of Machu Picchu is its only habitat. The largest legumes in the world grow on the basil tree. Its pods contain beans, which were ground into flour and made into stews by the first inhabitants of Peru. The mysterious garden below Machu Picchu is also a paradise for rare giant butterflies. After 3.5 hours of travel, the Hiram Bingham reaches Machu Picchu station. Those who don't mind the altitude of 2,040 meters can also climb the 400 meters to the ruined city on foot. The others take the bus. In the 15th century, the mystical city was built on a wild high plateau of the Andes. It impresses not only with its architecture, but also offers a fantastic view of the Urubamba Valley. Around 1,000 people are said to have lived here at that time. there are many stories about the origin of the well-preserved ruined city, but in fact, these ruins keep their secrets to this day. Llamas and their relatives, the alpacas, have made themselves comfortable here. The animal city dwellers pose good-naturedly in front of the cameras of the short-term guests. However, when and why the human inhabitants abandoned the city at that time will most likely remain another mystery in the history of Machu Picchu. Back in Machu Picchu Station, also known as Aguas Calientes, until today the starting point to the old mountain is only accessible by train. Even the laying of the railroad tracks is still considered a technical marvel today. The area is so narrow that the tracks have to virtually cling to the mountain. That's why the Hiram Bingham only runs on one track through the cloud forest. It owes its name to a famous explorer. Hiram Bingham made Machu Picchu known worldwide in 1911. From Cusco, the ancient capital of the Inca Empire, the Andean explorer travels through the high plains of the Peruvian Andes before reaching Puno and the world-famous Lake Titicaca. In the 19th century, the railroad line was planned for freight traffic, but that is no longer the case. Today, the Andean explorer transports travelers who want to see the sights in southern Peru. 30 kilometers per hour, sometimes 50 at peak speed, the old locomotive can't go any faster. For the first few kilometers, the Andean explorer jogs leisurely through the suburbs of Cusco. Just the right moment for the passengers to toast to an adventurous train ride. Clear the way for the Andean explorer on its research trip through the Cordilleras of Peru. While the jagged mountain peaks of the Andes pass by outside, you can feel every vibration on the train itself. This could be due to small bumps on the rails or rusty wheel sets. Nevertheless, the passengers do not skip a meal. Drinking plenty of water is particularly important. This is because sufficient fluid intake prevents altitude sickness. Above an altitude of 2,000 meters, many travelers suffer from headaches and nausea. The train climbs higher and higher through the so-called Altiplano, a largely treeless highland steppe. It runs between the high mountain ranges of the West and East Andes. Not a good area for plants. Only the prickly ichu grass, golden yellow in the dry season, can survive here. As it's quite cool in this part of Peru, the annual average temperatures vary between 2 and about 10 degrees centigrade. Night temperatures are often below freezing. But it is precisely in this wild roughness that the unique beauty of the landscape lies. The people live mainly off agriculture. The climate is ideal for the undemanding alpacas. The habitat of the alpacas is at an altitude of up to 4,000 meters. The animals are exposed to temperatures of up to -30 degrees. They can withstand this well because their wool keeps them particularly warm. Among the Incas, an alpaca coat was considered a sign of prosperity. To this day, the wool of the dark animals is particularly valuable. Aidi Mesa Chatata works in the laboratory of the Institute of Wool Fibers and Reproductive Biology. Together with the other researchers, she wants to find out how wool and meat production in Peru can be improved.
The most beautiful thing about my work is working with the animals, with the alpacas, the llamas. These are very special animals. I like to advance the research on these animals. There is a kitten. It was sick, and that's why it was brought here. Together we cured it and named it Mayonnaise. Yes, this is my favorite animal in this herd.
Since sustainability has become an issue in the fashion world, the demand for alpaca wool has also increased. Aidi Mesa Chatata wants to use her research to improve the wool quality. Since the thick fur hairs cannot be processed well, it should be possible to develop a simultaneously finer and more robust coat. Along the La Raya mountain range, the Andean explorer winds even higher through the Altiplano. The train approaches the watershed between the southeastern Andes ranges and the highlands of Peru and Bolivia. Here, at the highest point of the route between Cusco and Puno, at an altitude of over 4,000 meters, the Andean highlands show their breathtaking beauty. Time for a short rest. At Abra La Raya, the highest point of the journey to Puno, breathing becomes difficult, and the travelers' steps slow down. The traders don't mind the 4,338 meters. In the shadow of the snow-covered peak of Apu Chimboya, they sell their stock despite the altitude and cold. Clothes, bags, and warm blankets. The material, colors, and patterns are traditional. The cuts adapted to European tastes. The traders from Abra La Raya come from the villages nearby. In the agricultural region, financial poverty is high. The money that the travelers spend is their only earnings. Also for the artisans Fortunata, Martina, and Libia. They proudly present their work in the shared courtyard of Fortunata's house. Their songs, which they sing in their language, Quechua, are of course about love and about the transience of great feelings. They wear out like a colourful skirt. That's how they tell it in their old song. The backstrap loom on which the comrades work is one of the oldest loom forms in the world. Made of wood, bone and cords, it has hardly any weight. It is so light that it can be taken anywhere. In pre-Columbian Peru, clothing had a symbolic meaning that extended far beyond its practical purpose. It testified to power and social status and was designed differently at each stage of life. Weavings played an important role in ceremonies and rituals. For Fortunata Canascano Santa Cruz and her comrades, the costumes are a part of their lives.
We are dressed normally today, like every day. That's how we are recognized at carnivals. For walking in the countryside, we use this one.
All these colourful balls are pure natural products, even their intense colours. The craftswomen know exactly what they use to achieve the right shades. They draw on the traditional knowledge of their mothers and grandmothers. Herbs, seeds, roots. The women can make any colour from what the regional flora and fauna provides them.
It's turning red. Look here. You see? Red.
The dye of the cochineal lice provides an intensely bright red. The patterns that the women put into their handicrafts are inspired by nature, like flowers or the condor.
If a condor approaches, we think, we will make this condor. We count the threads. How to manage this animal? We think a lot, like studying.
The Andean explorer is slowly picking up speed again. On the observation deck, passengers enjoy the breathtaking view of the Altiplano, a brief pleasure. After sunset, temperatures tend to drop rapidly below zero at this time of year. The Andean explorer spends the night in the port of Puno. The city lies on the world-famous Lake Titicaca at an altitude of 3,812 meters. In the early morning light, the large body of water is particularly fascinating. The old stories around the lake come to life. According to legend, the Inca Empire began here, where Manco Capac and Mama Ocló emerged from the lake and founded the Inca dynasty. The fact that the lake is 178 kilometers long and up to 67.4 kilometers wide is no myth. Allegedly, Lake Titicaca is so large that it can even be seen from the moon, and it is the highest navigable body of water in the world. The train will stop until the afternoon today, enough time for the mechanic to work his magic.
I have already restored half the pressure, 90 libras.
But it's not just safety that's important. The steel steed should also shine from the outside. Lake Titicaca is the biggest attraction that the city of Puno has to offer. Puno was founded in 1668 by a Spaniard, in a time in which, in this region, mainly silver mines were operated, hence the name Puno, City of Silver. Today, the streets of Puno are a bit wilder than usual. The Andean explorer and its passengers are also feeling the effects of this. Because just as the luxury train is about to leave Puno and Lake Titicaca, it is brought to an abrupt halt. The reason? A folklore parade. Level crossings with barriers are extremely rare in Peru. No one here seems to be afraid of approaching trains. It looks more like some residents have made themselves at home on the tracks. How is a train supposed to get through here without an accident? It's quite simple. A safety vehicle ahead announces the passage of each train with loud honking. The control vehicle pushes forward. The Andean explorer wants to be on time. A bit of basic trust is part of living by the tracks here. People don't give the train an inch more than is necessary to get through, to then take to the track again immediately afterwards. Only where the inhabitants of Puno cannot reach the tracks can the train pick up speed, but a few meters further on it stops again. Students celebrate their university's 160th birthday. On this day, Puno really lives up to its reputation as the capital of folkloric festivals. But the Andean explorer has its own schedule. To make its way through the grey sea of houses according to plan, with its sights firmly set on the next destination. In a few minutes, the train has left the city behind. The view of the unique ecosystem around Lake Titicaca is clear again. The huge reed area in the Bay of Puno accounts for over 70 square kilometers. The totora reed is a sour grass plant and is used in many ways. It also serves as pasture for the cows of the indigenous people, the Urus. With its area of 8,372 square kilometers, Lake Titicaca is the largest freshwater lake in South America. It stretches across the border to Bolivia. Those who have already acclimatized to 3,820 meters above sea level on Lake Titicaca can enjoy a refreshing cocktail in the train bar. The others prefer water. And either way, you can enjoy the view from the train window. What can't be seen from the train, however, is climate change. Decreasing water levels are taking their toll on this unique natural formation. In the past, the Urus people lived on the lake. They were already here before the Europeans came to South America in the 16th century. Until a few decades ago, their descendants, the sea people, earned their living by catching fish and birds. But in the meantime, tourism has become the main source of income. Like for Fresia and her mother, Olympia. 7 days a week, they offer boat tours to the floating islands, the landmark of Lake Titicaca. Today, the young woman is on a mission of her own. She wants to visit her former teacher. Before that, the mother harvests a few stalks of the totora reed, a popular snack and a small present for the teacher. The white part of the reed is sweet and juicy. It's called chulo. The flowers can also be used to make tea. But the reeds are not only for eating. For Frasia's ancestors, life on the lake was hard. They were exposed to many battles and were a strident people. To defend themselves, they built islands of reeds in the lake. This was the only way to escape their enemies. On these small islands, the persecuted even survived for several years. The Urus became islanders, and the world's only displaced people who, in a sense, created their own country. For centuries, the Urus have built their islands with totora reeds. Its stalks grow up to 3 meters long. The inside of the stalk is riddled with cavities. Dried and bundled, the reed has a high buoyancy and can float on water, like a boat. Frasia's former school is located on one of the islands, a school for the children who live on the lake or in Puno. They travel to school by boat. The parents bring their children here, or the older ones come to school in their own boat.
Hey, Fresita, welcome back to your school. How's it going? Let's go. Hey, kids, come here. Here's something for you. Come here and help yourselves. Your comrade Fresita brought you chullo. Very good. They eat their chullo when they don't bring a snack for their break. This is their snack. How is it? It's delicious, right? Very good.
For the teacher, it's important that the children retain knowledge about the customs of their ancestors. Eating reeds is more than just a snack. It's part of the culture. Each of the islands consists of reed bundles about 80 centimeters thick. These are stacked crosswise and knotted together until the entire layer is about 2 meters thick. The children have got used to the fact that this platform must be renewed every 6 months. Otherwise, the reeds begin to rot and the school would sink. Playing on this surface can be great fun. The ground always sways a bit and the reed grass gives way when you run, almost like a trampoline. On the way home, Freysia and her mother Olympia pass reed farmers. They harvest the precious grass for further use as building material or as cattle feed. Reeds are the lifeblood of the people around Lake Titicaca. The Andean explorer continues westward. The last leg leads from Puno via Saracocha to Arequipa. The stretch from Lake Titicaca to Lake Saracocha is probably the loneliest section of the trip, a natural panorama as grandiose and undeveloped as the Arctic. Only a few fishermen's huts line the shores of the lake. In the early morning hours, the atmosphere at Lake Saracocha is the most impressive. A few hours rest for the train and enough time for the passengers to enjoy the array of colours. The alpacas feel at home in this inhospitable area. They find enough grass in the treeless highland steppe. After all, they have to eat 5% of their body weight every day. That's 2.5 to 3.5 kilograms, depending on their size. At least one explanation for why alpaca hunger seems endless. An estimated 3.5 million alpacas live in Peru, around 80% of the world's population. But not only do the alpacas find perfect living conditions here, Lake Saracocha is also a true feeding paradise for a number of water birds. The Andean flamingo feels at home here. Contrary to popular belief, this species loves the cold. In the early morning hours, the numerous waterfowl are particularly easy to observe. Framed by the train window, a snapshot memory. Working on the locomotive, a childhood dream of Juan Espinosa.
I've been fascinated by trains since I was a child because my grandparents were railroad workers. My greatest wish has always been to become a train driver, and I have achieved that. I am happy and fulfilled because I can drive this train, because it is the most luxurious train in Peru.
With the icy temperatures at over 4,000 meters, the only thing that helps is to wrap up warm.
The higher we go, the colder it gets. The challenge is that the rails have to be lubricated so that the wheels don't pop out of the tracks or ice over due to the frost.
It's not just the cold that can be dangerous. When the track is difficult to see, Juan Espinosa has to be ready for anything. A few kilometers after Saracocha, the Andean explorer passes the highest and coldest point of the trip at 4,528 meters. They must be particularly vigilant. Around every bend, there could be an animal on the tracks. When searching for water, vicuñas know no detours and no obstacles. This puts them in danger. Abrupt braking is not an option for the Andean explorer. Vicuñas are the wild relatives of alpacas. Although their wool is particularly precious, it has not been possible to this day to domesticate them. No tree grows in this part of the Andes. There's almost no rain. Volcanoes border the horizon in the distance. Otherwise, nothing but endless space, dust and blue sky. The wild west of Peru. Still, nomads are said to have passed through here hunting 8,000 years ago, and there are copper and zinc mines on the Altiplano. But the last settlements in this region were abandoned long ago, in search of the treasures of the earth. There is also an emergency exit on the Andean Explorer, but as a rule, passengers enjoy their 2 days on the train, even if every walk becomes a test for their sense of balance. The swaying ground is also a challenge for the waiters, but the experienced onboard staff do not spill a drop. They prance through the swaying train with fascinating ease. Only highly qualified personnel make it aboard the Andean Explorer. To ensure that everything runs smoothly, you have to be good at maths. Logistics is the be-all and end-all of onboard service. It's hardly surprising that some of the staff previously worked on cruise ships. That's where they learn to walk in a straight line when the carriage is lurching. In the galley, it's not only shaky, it's hot. Sous chef Carlos Risco is proud to serve a Michelin star menu twice a day.
We take into account in all our dishes that we are here between Cusco, Puno and Arequipa. We work with special ingredients so that our guests feel comfortable and so that the altitude doesn't affect them. We serve freshly caught sea bass with regional beans, flavored with muña. This is a digestive herb, good for our guests.
Food is also served in the train compartment. The narrow aisle makes it difficult for the staff. Even if the train sways, the plate remains unaffected. Undaunted, the train fights its way through the mountains.
It does that like a lion, I think. In a way, we are like the kings of the jungle here.
The Andean Explorer is approaching the next highlight of the trip. On one of the highest passes, in the middle of no man's land, the train heads for the small station, kilometer 93. Here, some of the travelers leave the Andean Explorer to make a detour into the Colca Canyon on their own. However, they still have to cover about 100 kilometers with a four-wheeler before they can enjoy the magnificent view. The gorge is one of the deepest on Earth, surpassing even the famous Grand Canyon in the USA. At its deepest point, it measures over 3,000 meters. In the morning, when the updrafts of the canyon are favorable, the most imposing bird of prey in South America takes advantage of the lift. At the so-called Cross of the Condor, they majestically launch into the air. Only about 10,000 birds still live in freedom today. It is a particularly magical moment for any observer when the King of the Andes circles the sky. Small birds like the hummingbird are also at home in Colca Canyon. The Incas called this tiny creature messenger of the sky. The hummingbird feeds on the nectar of the flowers. It sinks its long beak into the flower calyx exactly like a straw. The canyon was formed millions of years ago by the Colca River, which found a way through the mountains, creating the Valle del Colca of the same name. Ranchers in the region feared the giant birds, but now they appreciate the scavenger. Without it, diseases would spread due to dead corpses. Condor hunting is one of the many misunderstandings between man and nature. The region around the Colca Gorge has been used for agriculture for a long time. The plateau adjacent to the gorge consists of huge terraces created by man. Even before the Incas, the earth was made usable in this ingenious way. Corn, potatoes, and of course quinoa are cultivated here. At station kilometer 93, the Andean explorer gets ready for its final leg. From station kilometer 93 to Arequipa, the railroad line winds another 100 kilometers or so across the barren plateau in southern Peru. The route passes through the Reserva Nacional de Salinas y Aguada Blanca, a national nature reserve that covers over 3,600 square kilometers, a mythical area characterized by peculiar rock formations, a so-called stone forest. Among other animals worthy of protection, it's also home to the vizcacha, a Peruvian hare mouse that is actually related to the porcupine. Passing the gorges of the Rio Chili, the train reaches the Peruvian Cordillera Volcanica, the volcanic cordilleras. It is the name of several volcanic mountain ranges and an area that was sacred to the Incas. For them, the partly snow-covered volcanoes were the seat of the gods. Today we know that the Cordillera Volcanica is closely connected with the Pacific Ring of Fire, one of the most active volcanic regions in the world. In Peru, several tectonic plates touch. That's why there are more than 400 noticeable earthquakes every year. Not only in the Cordillera Volcanica does the ground quake again and again, there are also regular earth movements in the fertile plain on the way to Arequipa, up to 12 times a day. The people who live here have long since got used to it. North of Arequipa, the volcano Cachani majestically rises with its proud height of over 6,000 meters. And right next to it is the landmark of the city, the Misty volcano. The snow-capped volcanoes are considered the abode of the Apus, deities to whom priests sacrificed adults and children in the Inca era. For the inhabitants of Arequipa, it is certain, when the moon separated from the earth, it forgot to take Arequipa with it. The colonial buildings built of bright volcanic rock sparkle in the sun. Arequipa is widely known as one of the most beautiful cities in Peru. This is where the journey of the Andean explorer ends. The farewell ritual is always the same. The guests are thanked with a big round of applause. It's not uncommon for tears to flow. The intense experiences of the journey bring everyone together.